Good evening, everybody. Today is Monday, March 4th, and this is a regular Moscow City Council meeting. And Catherine?
Yeah, would you please join the staff, mayor, and the council in the pledge? I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Catherine. And one quick comment before I get into the consent agenda. I will make this announcement that in 2 weeks and 2 days is actually the first day of spring. So keep that. We'll start this thing off on a positive note, ladies and gentlemen. So there you have it. With that, I'll move on to the consent agenda.
I move to accept the consent agenda.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion by Catherine and a second by Gina to approve the consent agenda as it is placed. Further discussion or any discussion? I'll start the roll with Ann then.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Okay. Item number 2, staff recognition report. Jen, do we have anything this evening?
We do not have any staff recognitions this evening.
Okay. Mayor's appointments. I do have one appointment, and this is Bruce Hagelund for the 1912 Center Development Committee. No term on that. I would entertain a motion from the council to approve this person.
I move approval, Bruce, for that appointment.
Second.
Okay, a motion by Art and a second by Jim to approve Bruce Hagelund to the 1912 Center Development Committee. I'll start the roll with Catherine.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, Bruce, are you here this evening amongst the crowd? Okay, well, I always give anybody is on our commissions, new ones, old ones, regained ones, I always love for them to get a chance to get up, not only be recognized, but speak if they wish as well, so. But he is not with us this evening. Item number 4, public comment, mayor's response period. We allow 15 minutes of time for this. Allow people 3 minutes each, as long as it is not on tonight's agenda or in front of Board of Adjustment or Planning and Zoning. Come up, state your name, give us your reasons, what you want to chat with us about, and feel welcome to come up. Okay, well, we'll move on to number 5, which is the Heart of the Arts 1912 Center Annual Report. And we've got David and Jenny here with us, so I'll let David start it off. Good evening, David.
Mayor Lambert, members of council, thank you for having us tonight. It's my pleasure to welcome Jenny Kostroff with Heart of the Arts that manages the 1912 Center. She's here to present her annual report. So with that, Jenny.
Woohoo!
Spring's already sprung in Jenny, so.
Right. When you move around as much snow as we all have done in the past month, you get a little springy, even with snow boots on. That's right, I'm wearing my fine fashion. Just for you all. I didn't break out the fancy shoes. All right, well, so we've been very active in 2018, doing all kinds of cool things up at the 1912 Center. So I am here to tell you all about them. But first, who are we? We're Heart of the Arts Incorporated, a nonprofit company that was selected in 2006 to run, maintain, and grow the 1912 Center for the community. And we do that by enriching lives and creating our community. We operate and restore the 1912 Center. That's our mission. This was our 2018 board members. We are about to have our annual meeting, so we will have some new folks representing, but very important to note is our Linda Paul, who passed away this past year. Without her, the 1912 Center would definitely be a parking lot at this time, and I think it's really important that we honor her for her incredible contributions to the city. It was her vision that broken down space could actually serve the community, and it is doing exactly that. So I wanted to put a really big picture of her up on the screen for a little minute there, because we do miss her from our board very, very much. We miss her in the community too, but we really miss her from our board. In 2018, our goal to keep the building running smoothly, I want to share with you some fun things that we have. Well, then we have our team of employees. We have created a video of things that you can and cannot do and things that will make your experience so much better at the 1912 Center. So this photo was taken to be a part of that video, and that will be on our website very soon. But these are part of our custodial staff now in-house. Allison Jackson is one of our 2 janitors at the building, and this one is Tater. Tater is in training, and Olive is the resident service dog of the 2. So she has a team of dogs with her when she cleans in the building, and they are beloved by our senior center. That way, when Allie has a seizure coming on, she gets 45 minutes notice, and these dogs keep her in safe place. And meanwhile, they're great fun to have in the building too. So they're part of our custodial staff. We brought that in-house this year for the first time. We had been working with ABM in the past, and it's really nice to have our own janitors because they have ownership of the building and they do a beautiful job of keeping it nice. We also created an event planning tool that has been very successful with our community members renting the great room. So this is where the kitchen is and the balcony. These are the stairs down into the great room. Here's the great room with all of the lovely doors in the front. When you use this template that we give out like candy now at the building, you can draw little circles or rectangles or squares on the space, and you won't screw up your floor plan by drawing too many circles that won't fit in the building. And this has been really loved by everybody that's using this space for a wedding or memorial or birthday party or fundraising event. And we as a staff love it because we know exactly what they need in the building when they arrive. So I thought I'd showcase some events that have happened in the building this past year, just because it's really cool to see the variety of different things that happen in the same space. Let's see, we've had the Bot Ball Challenge. Lena Whitmore does a robotics challenge, and they had their a session there last May. And then we have a concert. Palouse Folklore Society does concerts in this space, and they put the concert stage in front of the kitchen for the best sound. We have had 3 soup fundraising events this year. They were very popular. Everything from Humane Society of Palouse, the Latah County Historical Society has changed their harvest dinner to be a local lentil and split pea soup fundraiser event, and the Recovery Center hosted a soup fundraiser this past fall, and it was very well received. Plus, all of us love soup at this time of year with the snow. Come on, soup is a win. We also had our very first kitten shower. There will be another kitten shower coming this year, so if you missed the first one, you should put April 7th onto your calendar and come out for a kitten shower. Very fun, because you get to see all these little kitties in the great room and hold them, and you learn all about what it takes to get through kitten season with the Humane Society. So that was a wonderful event at the building. We actually have someone in our audience who's featured right here. Joanne was working on her mosaic tile that goes in front of the library now, but she was working on it in the arts workshop. So we had all kinds of creative uses of the space. The arts workshop hosted the mosaic making session for the community, and we've had Palouse Patchers meetings in the building this year, and so they're showcasing all of the fine work that they've done. Lots of different creative groups coming in. Lots of celebrations this year, weddings and receptions, a New Year's Eve party. That was very well attended. Fundraisers for our nonprofits. Alternatives to Violence of the Palouse hosts their Home for the Holidays gingerbread fundraiser every year at the building, and the Alternative Giving Market hosted a banner year. Does anyone remember what number their year was this year? I think they were already at 10 years of doing the Giving Market, maybe more. Maybe it was more than 10. But anyhow, that was also very well received. It was the most money they've ever brought in for the nonprofits. And now let's talk about all the work that was done on the building this year, because every year we do work at the building, on the building, and for the building. So we refreshed the senior center. The green was getting a little tired and the carpet was really tired. So we got those fixed up this summer and freshened up the wall and put in new carpet, and the seniors really enjoy that. With a great room floor refinishing. Everyone thinks that this looks like a swimming pool, so I left the picture on there because I was like, yes, the 1912 Center now has a pool. But it was the shiny new finish getting put on by Andy Carr, and that turned out fantastic. And then the roof. The 1912 Center had a I think it's a TPO roof, wasn't it? And that stands for, in essence, a plastic roof in the past. And it was at the end of its life because over the years, the sun beats down on that plastic and erodes it, and you start to see the fibers of the plastic. And so we were due for a redo. So we partnered together with the city of Moscow to make sure that that roof got done properly, and we sprung for the metal roof that gives us a 30-year warranty. As you can see, the caps at the top were rusted, and the skylights were all the original metal. They'd been painted with this coating, but they were still the original metal and hadn't been covered with this TPO from before. So we realized that it was time to get those taken care of and sealed up to make them watertight. So Heart of the Arts partnered with the city. We paid for the new skylights as a part of this portion, and all of the side roofs. There are 7 side roofs on the building, and the city paid for the main body of the main roof, along with a parapet repair, because some of the I think you can see some of them here. These are the parapets along, there's these 2 on each, there's 1 on each side by the stairwells of the main walls that come up, and the little seams that are here kept getting painted over with tar every year, but in between those paintings they would crack open and water could get down in between. So we ended up, when we took those caps off, realized that the mortar had eroded in those, and so there was a little bit more work to be done to get that mortar replaced first before putting that metal roofing on top of those caps. And then along the top here, we can see a worker right up here, all the way at the top. They were painting the top coating to get that all the white, so you can see some of it's been painted and some of it still needs to be painted. And they put a sealant underneath it first before painting it. Then we loaded in the Armor Light roofing. Now it's kind of amazing when that gets loaded in. It's very small in terms of a footprint because it's thin metal, but it gets put over a nice core of, gosh, I can't even think. Insulation, that's the word I wanted. And throughout the summer, people thought it was snowing a little bit because some of that insulation would lift into the air and come down into our bushes, and they were like, what is that? I was like, that's some insulation, it's fine, and I'd pick it all up. Then, let's see, the skylights were taken out, and this is a picture with the skylight out up on the roof. And as it turned out, Chick Mabbitt, who was with Associated Architects, and I were on the roof when they were doing the work to put those new skylights in. And so we got some photos up there. And this is the cow wall. I always want to call it cow wall, but it's cow wall skylight. And here it is in place. It got trim work put around it. I just took this picture before I went down below and took the picture. So this is what those skylights look like, but this is multiple layered, insulated, and the light comes through. It's wonderful, and it means that our entire top roof is completely sealed in, which is very exciting. No more leaks! Ha ha! All right, and now we did some events ourselves. We hosted a staged reading. I might be married to this man here in the middle, and we used him as a draw to bring out people to hear The Odd Couple be read in the second floor stage space, which was super fun. Brandy can attest to the fact that she laughed for 2 hours, and I think that is a win in today's scheme of things, to have some time where you can just enjoy having a good laugh. The Odd Couple is a classic that way. And we're going to continue doing readings because every time Michael's in town, he can't do a full production because he's SAG and equity and all these fancy things. That means he's really expensive and not accessible to us, except for when we're doing a reading, and then we can borrow him, and he will play different characters for our community, which is fun. That was a fun fundraiser. We've had a lot of gallery shows in our hallway gallery. This one was from our Museum of Missing Stuff. This is the patron saint of missing things, St. Anthony. Tony, look around, things are lost that can't be found. We hosted an event called the Museum of Missing Stuff. This was inspired because I collect a lot of lost and found at the 1912 Center, and I put it all out on tables at our opening for this art show, and our community members made pieces of art, things that you might be missing, like missing your marbles or missing your socks, or who knows what you were missing, but we also had St. Anthony helping us out there. Art Walk, we featured Steve Gill. We always participate in Art Walk every year, and that was really fun. We had the Artability art on our walls following their opening in the Great Room. We hosted another community art show called Cheers, which was art, agriculture, and alcohol in honor of, there was a grain growers event that was at the building, and we wanted to be aware of what was going on with that in the community, and our community members made art around that theme. We also hosted an exhibit on this Wild and Scenic Rivers because it was the 50 years of that act, and Friends of the Clearwater helped us get an art show in the hallway showing all the rivers, and the Palouse Prairie Charter School students had paintings in that show as well. And then Carla Newman Smiley and Will Smiley, husband and wife artists, featured pieces of art that they both made, and they, I guess, steal from each other's creativity. So I thought that was really fun to have them featured in the space. We had 3 plaza concerts this past summer, and all this green. Look at all the green, everybody. It's green. We have green sometimes, just to remember. But then we go back to winter. Okay, so we had a winter market season that we just finished up, the 14th season of the winter markets, and this is also a reminder that there are wonderful things that can grow when we have sunshine and no snow. This was our November market, and I couldn't believe we had strawberries. The Akeley Farm came and they brought strawberries. That was amazing. So there you go. Fundraising for the future. We put a window. This is really important. We put a window in the hallway. This was a wall, and no one knew that these were stairs that go up in the building. And this is the entranceway that's right by the senior center. My office is off to that way. And we decided people needed to know that there are stairs that we are hoping to open up in 2020. So our plan is to finish our fundraising this year. We need to raise $300,000 this year, and then we will be able to go out to bid on the next floor renovation, a project that I will be presenting to council shortly, so you can see all the plans. And then once we get going on that, our hope is to be done by the end of 2020 to have 6 more spaces upstairs. So this serves as a reminder that there's more to the building than the parts that we're using right now. A lot more. And they're very fun, and everyone should want to get up there. And the only way to do that is to raise some money. Woohoo! See, look at those cool spaces. Right now they just have open ceilings in them, all these beams and stuff, but very soon this will become active. And that's my story. Does anyone have any questions? Because I can answer them.
Well, you certainly have not lost any enthusiasm in the last 12 years that I've known you. Jenny, it's amazing because you have been a huge part of this with the Heart of the Arts, and this 1912 building, of course, is just a unique place for all of us. So it was wonderful report. Questions for Jenny from council?
Yeah, I wanted to hear, how was the 1912 center sign going?
Well, the 1912 Center sign is under a little bit of a remodel. So our original plan to do mosaic tiles and everything came in at $40,000. And then we said, I think we would rather put $40,000 into our next floor's renovation and maybe scale back the plan of the sign. So the new plan for the sign is that this summer we will be addressing getting the base built and using that same laminate that we currently have. It's a vinyl, and put that on a surface that could eventually hold a mosaic tile. But in the meantime, it will have some lighting and it will have a strong base. It will have landscaping as required by our lovely requirements of monument signs. And so it'll be beautiful and it will serve the purpose, and then we will eventually graduate it to a mosaic tile. And I'm not saying they're going to get cheaper. I'm just saying that we're going to have that be a different project.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Speaking of signs, is the plan that the Historic Preservation Commission, they've been working on the interpretive sign, is that still planned to be installed in the spring?
We're working on getting that put in as soon as the weather cooperates, I'm assuming.
When they produce the top,
Yeah.
yeah, yes, the answer is pretty certain.
Yeah, and we found a great spot for it too that worked between, we like walked around and like held it out. Mike held it. So we had it like physically in the space and we were like, this is perfect. So we found a spot where if you were to stop, you could read it and you wouldn't be in the way, and it would have a smooth surface that if someone was using a wheelchair and wanted to read it, they'd be able to. So we've mapped that part out. I'm really proud of us for being ready with it. But as soon as it gets produced, we'll get that installed as well.
Are you considering doing Yscape on the hill?
Yes, so that's part of the sign work. So as soon as that's done, we can carve in on the lawn that we let die every year, and I'm an embarrassment to the neighborhood, I'm sure. But meanwhile, all I have to say is I'm not using water, so yay. But we're gonna sort of carve it in and make a smaller spot of lawn that behaves a little bit better. Right now, we've got a lot of weeds holding that hillside in, and I'm the first to admit that the spray that we put in there had some weed seed in it, and we've been sort of dealing with that ever since. If you look in the spring, the nice coating of white flowers, those represent bindweed, and that's a weed. And so we're going to try to get all of that under control, but we're going to put the sign in first because we've got to dig that out first. And then once we've got that done, it'll be all... Plus, you can't landscape right now, Catherine. You just want to, but you can't.
I know, seeds, they're in the stores.
No.
That's what it is.
My last question is about the classroom that you had projected. Is the Lehigh Historical Society the one that's in charge of?
We will be in charge of the historic classroom in
Okay.
partnership with the Historical Society for materials and potentially volunteers, but Heart of the Arts will be running that program. She's talking about on the next floor up, we will have a historic classroom, and that classroom will take kids back to 1913 school, so they'll get to experience that, whether they're homeschool students or students at Logos or students at the high school or students in Lena Whitmore or the charter school, Palouse Prairie, and hopefully busing kids even from farther out like Genesee and Troy and Viola and even Pullman and giving them the experience of what it was to learn in 1913. So it'll be a period of time that we will keep that classroom occupied with that program, and then once that like month or two that we've got that set aside where the kids would go back in time for that experience, then that classroom can be rented as a classroom to use. So the idea of having modern laptops in a historic classroom really cracks me up, and I think people will really enjoy that.
Other questions for Jenny?
And then I gave Lori a bunch of packets, but I don't think she gave them to you guys. But did you email that one to people, or will you? I wrote a paper packet that also includes our financials, and she has that.
Thanks.
And then also I sent it as a digital, so it'll be in the minute stuff too. Sweet, thank you so much.
You're very welcome, Jenny. Thank you. I would,
Davey, mute it, baby. Whoop.
and David, would entertain somebody and make a motion to accept this report.
I would move acceptance of Jenny's report.
Second.
Okay, we've got a motion by Art and a second by Brandy to accept the Heart of the Arts 2018 Annual 1912 Center Report. We'll start the roll with Ann.
Aye.
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 Okay, thank you very much. Okay, we will move on to item number 5, which is appeal of a conditional use permit at 421 South Jackson Street. Leah Carlson is presenting, so Leah, you have the floor.
Thank you. All right, so as you said, we have an appeal for a conditional use permit, and the property's at 421 South Jackson Street. So the applicant is New St. Andrews, and they had requested a conditional use permit to convert an existing parking lot into a dedicated student and employee parking lot at this location. And per our city code, educational services are listed as a conditional use within the central business zoning district. And therefore, a parking lot dedicated to off-street parking for a college requires a CUP. So the subject property is located off of Jackson Street here. However, there's no access to the subject property from Jackson Street. Access is from the alleyway off of 6th Street. So the subject property in total is 7,500 square feet, and it's currently used as an unregulated parking lot with no structures on the lot. The lot is partially paved from gravel, with the gravel surface in the center where a building used to be located. And it's within the central business zoning district, like I mentioned before, and properties north and south and east of it are also within the central business zoning district. And then to the west, there's a row here of resident office zoning district. So just to provide some background here, this CUP is one in a line of other CUPs, and they're all connected. So back in 2008, the Board of Adjustment approved a conditional use permit for New St. Andrews to be located at 405 South Main Street. This is the location off of Friendship Square. And one of the conditions of that conditional use permit was to require 42 off-site parking stalls to be provided for the use by New St. Andrews College employees and students, and they could reside either within or outside of the central business zoning district. So following this CUP in 2008, there was another CUP that was filed and approved in 2013 for the parking that was required in the 2008 CUP to exist at 505 South Jackson Street in order to satisfy this condition. And so then moving on to 2017, the Board of Adjustment approved another CUP which permitted an additional educational institution also belonging to New St. Andrews to be located at 112 North Main Street. This conditional use permit had two conditions tied to it. The first one was that the applicant must provide 47 off-street parking spaces within a quarter mile of the subject property. And the second one is that the applicant would be allowed to phase in the off-street parking requirement by providing 50% of the required parking mitigation upon occupancy of the building. And so this is just a map showing the different CUPs and how they're all connected to each other. So again, the 2008 CUP here was for the campus location off of Friendship Square, located at 405 South Main. And then the parking lot tied to this location was at 505 South Jackson, which was in 2013. Then the 2017 CUP over here was at 112 North Main. And the parking lot that we're here today about is at 421 South Jackson Street. So I'm just going to briefly talk about the two conditions from the 2017 CUP and how they are met with this CUP presented today. So condition one was that the applicant must provide 47 off-street parking spaces within a quarter mile of the subject property. As you can see here, it meets that condition because they're 0.21 miles apart. Number two was that the applicant is allowed to phase in the off-street parking by providing 50% of the required parking upon occupancy of the building. And the plans for this parking lot show a total of 25 spaces with 10 standard, 14 compact, and 1 ADA parking spot. So it does meet this as well. And this is just a picture showing what the site looks like from Jackson Street. You can see again there's no access from Jackson Street. And this is the view from the alley. So when the board approved this conditional use permit, they have to find that it meets all 7 relevant criteria and standards, and they did find that it met all 7 relevant criteria and standards, and you'll find an expanded version on this in your packet as well. The BOA, a public hearing was conducted at the Board of Adjustment meeting on January 15th, and public testimony was received, and subsequently, the Board of Adjustment approved the application for a conditional use permit for a dedicated parking lot for NSA students and staff located at 421 South Jackson Street with 2 conditions. Number 1, the applicant shall bring the subject property into compliance with the City of Moscow parking lot standards, which includes paving, curbing, striping, and landscaping. Number 2, they shall install signage stating that the lot is reserved for NSA parking only. So at a following meeting on January 24th, the relevant criterion standards were approved by the Board of Adjustment. And then on February 4th, we did receive an appeal letter from community member Joanne Menuda. So today, the council can either sustain the decision of the board in whole or in part, or reverse the decision of the board in whole or in part, remand the matter in whole or in part to the board with comments and/or instructions for further consideration by the board, or take other action as deemed appropriate, and also direct staff to prepare a written decision based on the council's action. And I'm happy to take any questions that you might have.
Well, as we go along, a couple of things I want to state here. This is a public meeting and not a public hearing. And there's basically going to be 3 steps here. What we're going to do today is there will be no new testimony from anyone. It will be the record that we have had in front of us, and the council, as well as myself, has had the description of the entire hearing that happened on January the 15th. And so what we'll be doing, we'll hear from the appellant, Joanne Menuda, and we'll give her 5 minutes to tell us what her appeal is, and then we'll hear from the respondent from New St. Andrews for the applicant for 5 minutes, and then Joanne will get a chance to rebut that. And there will be no other public comment other than that. And then this board up here, this Board of Judges, will make the decision as to the direction that this goes. Any questions for Leah before we get started?
I have a question for you, Leah.
Brandy?
Yes. How many spaces are in the 505 lot that is currently serving the original?
It has 30 spaces, and so if I go back here. So the 2008 CUP required 42 total spaces, so the 505 parking lot has 30 spaces, and then the other 12 are located at a church. Let me get the names. The Trinity Reformed Church on Palouse River Drive.
Leah, say that again, slower, please.
Sorry. So 30 of those off-site spaces are located at 505 South Jackson, and then the other 12 are located at Trinity Reformed Church on Palouse River Drive. So
Tell me what the total was, again, the required.
42.
Perfect. Thank you.
You're welcome.
And with the conditions of parking for both of these to be dedicated to meet the use of NSA students and staff.
Yes.
I know that it is open to the public after 5 p.m. and on weekends. So is that going to be the case with this current one that we're considering?
They're not required to do so. If they choose to do so, then that's certainly an option. However, it's not a requirement.
Right, but I guess my question more is the requirement only that they be dedicated spaces available on weekdays until 5 p.m.? Is that what the condition is requiring, and that they do not need to be available outside
Bill,
of that time?
do you want to answer that?
So the condition in the 2017 CUP or even 2008 didn't specifically address the hours of operations of the parking. We would generally require that the parking be available during hours of operation of the college. They could certainly make those available to the public after hours, but in order for them to provide the mitigation that it was intended, they'd have to be available for the college, for the faculty, for the faculty and student use during times of college operations. But if they wish to voluntarily make them available to the public like they have on the lot to the south, and actually I think that was potentially a condition of approval of the lot to the south previously, that certainly would not, they'd be fulfilling their obligation to provide the parking that was required.
Okay, questions? Joanne, you'll get your chance. Bill, would you repeat that? So-
I think I said so long as they're open and available to the college, faculty, staff, and students during hours of operation of the college. That's all that's technically required. If they wish to make them available to the public after hours when they're not in operation, they certainly could do so.
And they're not required to make them available outside of school hours. I guess that's
Not by
what,
the conditions of the board's approval, correct. The board did not specify that they would be open and available to the public after hours in the current decision.
I'm sorry, but they're not required to have them set aside for NSA use outside of the typical school hours. That's what I mean.
Correct.
Is a mitigation. It's been determined that on weekends, they don't need to provide mitigation, for example.
That's how we would interpret it. So the conditions did not specifically state that. So the condition of the 17 CUP that required that they had a certain number of off-street parking spaces did not specifically state for during the hours of operation, did not address any use of that parking space during evenings or on weekends. We would interpret it that it needs to be available during hours of operations of the college, and that they would not be required to reserve it for their sole use in hours when they're not in operation or on the weekends. So that's how we would interpret that condition, that it has to be available during their hours of operations. But the CUP in 17 was not specific. It just said they had to provide this parking. There was no obligation that that parking be open to the public, and it did not address its use after hours or on weekends.
Okay. We're getting some feedback. Okay, Zach's got us going again. Okay, I guess we are ready to go here. So, thank you, Leah. If we have questions, we'll ask you or Bill. But at this time, we'll get the appellant, which is Joanne Midwita. Joanne, if you want to come up, and we'll give you 5 minutes to state your case.
Thank you.
And I probably should ask you to state your name, even though we all know who you are.
Joanne Manita, 203 South Howard. I'm very appreciative of this opportunity. This is the 8th appeal related to the North Main location of that was CJ's, but it's only the second that you're actually hearing, so I feel very honored that I can present it, even though it costs $240 to do it. I am here relative to the importance of having Board of Adjustment CUP processes and CUP decisions that are in just accord with the Moscow City Code and which fulfill the expectation of the public that these processes and decisions be reasonable, consistent, and transparent, and in accordance with the code. So I think you all know this story begins in 2005 when the City Council passed a resolution number 200533 saying that we can have educational institutions in the Central Business District as a conditional use. And in doing so, they said it was very important to allow for appropriate public input in order to determine the suitability of those institutions. And also, it's in the best interest of the public to require off-street parking for educational institutions. So that's what we're talking about today. So what you have heard is that first of all, there are a lot of CUPs that we're juggling, right? This 2006, 2008, which allowed New St. Andrews to have an educational institution on South Main. I'll call it Friendship Square Institution. And in 2013, they got another CUP to be able to use 505 South Jackson as off-street parking for that institution, for those students. Now in 2017, there's another CUP that proclaims that says that the North Main, former CJ's, could be another music conservatory that New St. Andrews wishes to establish. And it has the requirement of having a certain number of off-street parking to mitigate the problem that they're going to eventually be allowed 300 students, FTE, and 45 faculty staff FTE. Well, when it came to this hearing that occurred, I spoke up because it was very difficult to figure out what exactly the hearing was about. And it's part of the Moscow City Code that the hearing be explicit in what it's providing. And so I went online to see what the application said. The application from NSA said, NSA has 2 locations in the central business district with off-street parking requirements, and the proposed change in use, that was to this 421 South Jackson, is intended to meet a portion of that off-street parking requirement. So a portion of what off-street parking was not stated. It's very vague, and the public was not clear as to the fact that it was referring to the North Main location, and also that by approving this, it would give the city the right to issue a certificate of occupancy to 421, to 112 North Main. And that was never stated. As it turned out, the vagueness, I don't know if it was purposeful or not, but it was appropriate because New St. Andrews, through Dr. Merkel, stated that this parking lot was not to be reserved for students attending the North Main New St. Andrews location. It was going to be open to all New St. Andrews students and faculty. And I submit that if it's not reserved for the students at North Main, then it is not satisfying the condition that the students have off-street parking, this certain number, 25, because it's half of the 47. I mean, if someone tells you, well, you can have the parking in front of your house, but that your neighbors are going to park there too, that'll make you wonder, well, am I going to have it or am I not going to have it? The students at North Main are not obligated to use that parking, but if it's not available to them, if they have to compete with other students attending the Friendship Square location, then it is not satisfying the mitigation that was promulgated in CUP of 2017. How do we know that that was important to that CUP? Well, the Board of Adjustment discussed parking when the request first came to them. Then it went back and forth, and there was, you might remember, they were looking at parking spaces in the morning and not at the busy time of day. Then there was an appeal to the City Council, and you discussed parking, remanded it back to the Board of Adjustment, and they discussed parking. And this number of spaces went from 104, that wasn't seconded, and then finally they decided 47, and it had to be within 1/4 mile, and it was very specific to provide mitigation for the number of students. This is not satisfying that obligation because it's within 1/4 mile, but it's being shared. And in sharing it, we now will have 2 parking lots, 421 South Jackson, 505 South Jackson, all open to all the students of New St. Andrews, both locations, and the faculty and the staff and anyone else involved.
I need you to wrap it up, Joanne, please.
Oh, okay. So what is in fact happening is they are bundling the obligations from CUP 2013 and CUP 2017 and created one big parking lot. Now, maybe they can do that, but that was not discussed. And in fact, the Board of Adjustment, they talked about, shouldn't you really be reserving this for these North Main students?
Well, Joanne, why don't we, I gave you 7 minutes. Why don't we hear from
Well,
the
let me
applicant,
just
and you're going to,
conclude.
And
Wrap
yes,
up.
and then you're going to get a
Okay,
chance.
I'll just wrap up by saying that members of the Board of Adjustment, 4 out of 5, said they did not feel comfortable telling the property owner what he should do with his property. And I submit that that's what the Board of Adjustment is supposed to be doing, and they were not, they abdicated their responsibility to bring some order to this. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, now we will hear from the respondent, the applicant. Please state your name, sir, and who you represent.
Good evening, Mayor Lambert, members of the council. My name is Sam Creason. I'm an attorney with Creason, Moore, Docken, and Geidel, and it's my privilege to speak to you tonight on behalf of New St. Andrews College. I recognize that this council has able attorney and counsel in Ms. Vowles, but I hope you'll allow me to talk to you a little bit about my perspective on the judicial review, or what it would look like in the unfortunate event that this was reviewed, because this board sits as a quasi-judicial board that's in the Moscow City Code 4.8-4A3. So it's a type 1 quasi-judicial review. What does that mean? It means this board, as the mayor pointed out, you're on a limited record, whatever the record was before the Board of Adjustment, and you're limited to the issues that were actually raised before the Board of Adjustment. So you're looking at, okay, did the Board of Adjustment make an error in law, number one, or number two, did they act against the evidence? Did they act in a manner that was arbitrary and capricious? And when you're looking at that, I would point out to this board, you're looking at a staff-recommended CUP and a unanimous vote for approval of the CUP. Now, Ms. Manita's first two issues that she raises to this board are an issue of the sufficiency of notice. As well, we didn't receive proper notice. And so that question is really an attack to whether the city clerk, Lori Hopkins, and the deputy city clerk, Ann Peterson, issued proper notice. The notice is in your packet. You can find it. Now, here I've marked mine up a little bit, but you can see it as the notice of public hearing. So the question before this council on the first two issues raised by the appellant is, was there an error of law in issuing notice? And I would submit to you that there wasn't. In fact, the notice issued by Ms. Hopkins was beyond sufficient. Under the Idaho Code, what's required is a notice of the time and place and a summary of the proposal. The Idaho Supreme Court has said generally it's for the need is to put a person on inquiry of the general subject matter. And certainly this notice not only does it on its face, but the notice tells city members where they can go to get more information. So the first two issues do not present this council with a sufficient reason to overturn the Board of Adjustment decision. The third issue is whether the granting of the CUP was proper with respect to 112 North Main. Ms. Manita argues that the Board of Adjustment should have approved it with additional conditions, and she stated that again tonight, that the Board of Adjustment should have approved it with the condition that there be some sticker or restriction that students who are FTEs at North Main are the only ones allowed to use that lot. And what the council will see on the verbatim transcript is that the Board of Adjustment did consider that. They did wrestle with the issue. Before them was the city staff's comment of a difficulty in enforcing such a restriction. There was a public comment that it would have been counterproductive, that here the applicant is trying to make the parking areas more open to the public, more usable, so that it reduces the I guess at least alleged adverse effects that the college was having. And so this council has to look not at what they would have done, but I would submit that they need to look at, well, was it arbitrary and capricious for the Board of Adjustment to wrestle with that and then to say, you know, we don't think that it's in the best interest of the CUP to restrict that lot only to some sort of tagging or permitting for the North Main property. And to be arbitrary and capricious, this council would have to find that the Board of Adjustment acted in a way that no reasonable mind could reach the conclusion that those 5 Board of Adjustment members unanimously reached. And so issue 3 doesn't present this council with a basis for overturning the decision of the Board of Adjustment to require permitting or require New St. Andrews to provide the parking, but not to restrict use. I'd be happy to answer questions from the council on that because there are sufficient answers. I don't think that it is material to the council's decision, but I would point out that New St. Andrews did state on the record, and I'm sure that they'll stand by this, that the intent is for 8 to 5 to restrict it to people with permits so that they can mitigate their use, but then to leave it open in the evenings and on the weekends for the general Moscow public. And that's not an anti-mitigation. What that is it's actually allowing more parking in downtown, which is the adverse effect that people identified, or at least the alleged adverse effect. Coming down to issue 4, the Ms. Manita argues that it was improper because the City Council, the Board of Adjustment should have reconsidered all CUPs currently held by New St. Andrews. I guess I might disagree with city staff when they said that this issue goes back and went through the history of CUPs. I understand the discussion point, but as a legal matter, the CUPs that have been granted are a vested property right. This council, the time to appeal those or to challenge those to the courts has long passed. And so an invitation for this council to either invalidate granted CUPs or to try to render granted CUPs illusory by saying, well, we know the former council made a final decision and gave you conditions, but we're just going to make those conditions non-reachable. I would say this council can't do that. That would be a deprivation of a vested property right. And that's where we get into, Councilor Sullivan, I think your question, and I don't want to read into your question, but you know, the idea of, well, do they have to make it open to the public? I think the Board of Adjustment aptly identified it's private property, so we don't want to tell them that they have to make a public use out of it, but we want them to mitigate. And so I think New St. Andrews did the neighborly thing, which they said, well, look, we want it to be made open to the public during farmers market, during the evenings when our students aren't using it. But you've told us you also want mitigation, so we'll permit it during the day and tell our students to get over there and use the parking. The final issue is that the Board of Adjustment, in the written appeal, was that the Board of Adjustment failed to consider the application in light of 112 North Main CUP conditions. Members of the council, this is factually inaccurate. If you go to your verbatim transcript, I just did a quick search. The Board of Adjustment wrestled with it on page 1, 2, 4, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 18, and 23. This was the issue in front of the Board of Adjustment. This was clearly argued in front of the Board of Adjustment. And then in the follow-up email, Ms. Manita argues that the application attempted to impermissibly transfer parking from meeting the South Main site to the North Main site, and as the city staff identified, that's not accurate.
I need you to wrap it up, please.
Yes, I will. Thank you, Mayor. I thank you for your time. I would say you have a private entity that's trying to put private dollars into providing parking downtown. You have a unanimous decision, and we'd ask that the city council uphold that decision.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Joanne, if you'd like to get back up here, and I'm going to let you get a chance to rebut. I'll give you 5 minutes, Joanne.
Okay. Did the Board of Adjustment wrestle with this issue? They did not. They asked a couple of questions about it, and Dr. Merkel said, well, this would be difficult for us to do. The University of Idaho doesn't have their parking lots limited, which was in fact incorrect. They do limit their parking lots. But the main thing is, when it came to deliberation, okay. I'm sorry. Don't count this, I'm not talking yet. I want to clarify that I was not suggesting that the Board of Adjustment go back to the previous CUP for 505 and overrule that. I was instead saying that you need to overturn this decision because it does not satisfy the requirement as stated by the Board of Adjustment on 2017 to have spaces to mitigate the appeal, to mitigate the condition of additional parking. what, in the deliberation of the Board of Adjustment, for example, Steve Bush says, "We have a situation here where a business that is downtown owns the land, and I think the landowner has every right to do whatever they want with that building, with that piece of property." And Mr. Munson says, "I'm troubled with the idea that we would somehow tell them that they can't do what they want with their property. I'm troubled with the idea that we would somehow tell them you can't sell this or you can't develop it how you want." And my point is that is what they were supposed to be doing. If they saw that there was a problem, that the parking places would not be reserved for the purpose for which they were requesting the CUP for the purpose of satisfying the 2017 CUP. It does not satisfy the 2017 CUP. And they recognized that, but they didn't want to do anything about it because they said the property owner can do what he wants with the property. So if you approve this, what you will be approving is that there will be one parking lot for 505 and 421 for the students of South Main NSA and North Main NSA. I submit that that was not the intent of the Board of Adjustment in requiring off-street parking mitigation. And I don't have the money to have a lawyer, but the one other part that seems to be under discussion is the benefit of being able to use that parking lot in the evenings and weekends. The 505 lot has that posted, and the 421 South Jackson one is not required to post it. So we don't know yes or no, and it's got nothing to do with the issue in question, which is where are the students going to park? Thank you.
Thank you, Joanne. Leah, did you have something you want to comment before we're going to deliberate up here? Is there something you want to, if we need you, we'll call you up. I'll turn this over to council and let's have a discussion. Who would like to start, Jim?
Mr. Mayor, I would like to hear what our legal counsel has to say about the issue, if anything.
Do you have a specific question?
Well, I didn't know if you had a specific legal opinion on the conditions of the appeal, recommendation based on that, or no. If you don't, that's fine. I just...
Well, I do. In reviewing the Board of Adjustment decision, it appears that they did understand what the mitigating conditions were in the conditional use permit that was approved in 2017. They made their decision based on that. The reason statement seemed to be clear, so based on that decision, it appears that they did understand what the issue was, that they addressed that, and then made the unanimous decision to approve the conditional use permit as those meeting those requirements from 2017.
One thing I want to add real quick, just for all council, we're just talking about this one use permit on 421 South Jackson. We're not talking about anything other than that, just so we don't get the water muddied here, so everybody understands that. Art, you acted like you had a question. Art, did you have a question?
Just some thoughts with a question at the end, probably for you, Mia, or maybe Bill, or anyone, but quick math says that the parking lot under consideration at 412 would have 25 spaces. The current lot at 505 has 30, and there's 12 more spaces elsewhere. Do the 30 spaces at 505 and the 12 spaces elsewhere have to ride with the existing Friendship Square, New St. Andrews, or can that requirement be modified and put those parking spaces someplace else in town and use the entirety of 421 plus 505 to satisfy the parking requirements for the North Main location?
Yeah, go ahead, Bill.
The 30 spaces at the 505 parking lot are limited to the South Main location. I'll call it Friendship Square location. That was a material consideration of the board during deliberation on that CUP in 2013. So it has been our interpretation that that parking, those 30 spaces, are bound to the South Main location.
Thank you.
So-
Spot on.
By
Randy?
extension, then, those spots are tied to meeting the condition for the south location. Would this lot that we're discussing now would have to be tied to the 112?
Correct.
And so there is a potential problem with them being merged and not separated. Is that correct?
So the question of, I guess, from our perspective as staff, we want to make sure that the total required parking spaces for mitigation are provided in the proper location spatially to the use that they are serving. So that means that there has to be 47 spaces, essentially within a quarter mile of the North Main location. The 42 spaces technically could be anywhere in the city for the South Main location. However, they applied for the CUP in 2013 for those 30 spaces to be dedicated to the South Main location, so we have interpreted that to mean that those parking spaces are tied to that specific location. The remaining 12 could be located anywhere else in the city, as that condition was very vague in 2008, where it was inside or outside the central business district. So those could be placed, honestly, anywhere in the city. That will mean that there be, if this were to be upheld, that there's another 22 spaces that will be required to be provided within a quarter mile of CJ's, or the North Main location. And then we will verify that those spaces are provided and whether they require another CU because it's in the central business, or if it's the use by right outside the central business district, they'll have to provide proof they have legal right to use the additional 22 spaces within that quarter mile distance. And the total mitigation numbers will have to be, will be verified. That's really the extent of what we can do. And I think the board wrestled with that question of knowing what student that's attending classes and what facility are parking in what location. In our office's opinion, the total number of mitigated, total number of parking spaces that are required to be mitigated need to be provided, and we'll verify that those are available and are provided. But trying to enforce or administer who's parking in which lot would be very difficult to do. But I do feel that just in the providing of the total number of spaces in the proper location, they will be fulfilling the conditions and the mitigation that was required of both the CUPs.
Okay.
I have a question.
Catherine?
If enforcement was part of the concern, we talked about that the University of Idaho has theirs marked in such a way that they do enforcement. Can we require NSA to do enforcement since it's their lots? Can that be part of making sure that those particular parking spaces are utilized by that particular part of campus?
I guess as a practical matter, those parking spaces are, they're right next to each other. I'm not sure what material benefit it would provide. I think what's important is that the total number of parking spaces are provided, that there are, there's a 30 that are currently dedicated in close proximity to the South Main location, and the additional 47 will need to be provided within that quarter mile distance. Beyond that, I don't know that there would be really a material benefit to trying to enforce or regulate parking from one stall to the stall next to it.
Yeah, I suppose if these 25, if these 25 spots are to meet the needs of the North Main location, yet it's being shared by the South Main location, then there are not 25 spots dedicated to the North Main. And could that put everything in jeopardy? If they're not, would that mean that they're not meeting a condition? I think would be important to be sure that those 25 spots are reserved for the use that's tied with that 112. And if students that are enrolled in the South are using on any given day 5 spots, that means now there's only 20 spots and they're not meeting the condition anymore.
Well, let me put this out here. Yeah, it's because we're kind of struggling a little bit with that. You've got one parking lot that's got 30 spaces provided. You got another new parking lot that's going to have 25 spaces for a total of 55. It seems to me like you've fulfilled that requirement with the total number there.
Well, the total number required
You
is
got 30
89.
Well, yeah, but you got to remember something. This is, they only need 50% to start the occupancy. They're gonna have to find another 22, but they don't need to do that right now. That's not part of this issue. The other 12 are out, some in a different area. So you've got that requirement for the total numbers, and whether that parking lot was from me to Bill, you still got the numbers.
Well, you'd
And what
have,
they're gonna have to do is find another spot for the additional 22, but that's not what we're talking about here, Brandy, because
right,
that's.
so combined, it would be 55 spaces.
Yep, you got 55 spaces.
And
47.
Well, no, she's talking about the whole thing, Jim. She's talking about the 30 from the south campus.
The south campus is irrelevant to the decision we're making.
I know that.
Well, I
and-
know, yeah.
But
that's-
she's concerned, Catherine and Brandy are concerned where people are parking. The point I was trying to make is they got plenty of numbers in those two parking lots, you got 55. They got 12 outside, and you need to find and discover another 22 somewhere before the thing is complete. Is that correct, Bill?
The condition was within 5 years
5 years
or
of
within certain
occupancy starts.
enrollment at the north main
So,
location.
so is there no issue with now merging the two parking requirements into one lot? And saying as long as the total equals the total that was required for these two separate ones, it's okay? Is that okay?
Well, all they were required was 25 spots. It wouldn't make a bit of difference where they put them.
Right, but they would have to be 25 spots dedicated for that use, for that
And
building.
the other 30 are dedicated too, so whether they parked right in one, in the north one or in the south one. what
So it will
difference
be
does
the
it make?
same if the next 22 spots are in an entirely different location, they can all be shared?
Well, it would.
I mean,
Say
if
yes.
it just has
Yeah.
to be within a quarter mile, suppose in a quarter mile the other direction, can they also be used by the South Main
The
location?
practicality is our ability to administer and enforce that would be difficult.
It's total numbers is what we should be looking at. That's what we're talking about. It's total numbers. And where they own both those lots, it's their lots, yes.
Well, it occurs to me that the conditional use permit is, that they have to provide the spots. They have to provide this many off-street parking spots. They don't, the enforcement of that is not, of who uses them is not part of the permit. And even if it was part of the permit, then the city would be in a position of having to enforce their enforcement, because it's private property, and whatever they do, their enforcement would be in-house. And then we would have to, again, enforce their enforcement, and I don't think there's any practical way. But in any event, that's not part of the permit. That's not part of the condition of the permit. So I don't think it's relevant for us to consider that. As long as the spots are off-street parking is being provided, then the condition of the permit is being met, correct?
Correct, as long as they're being provided and reserved for the use.
And obviously, I don't want to see a shell game kind of thing going on where we've provided these spots and then we're going to transfer the original 30 to the North Main thing and find some other spot that's within a quarter of a mile to satisfy the south. That I think that has to be connected to the original permit. The parking that was attached to the original permit cannot be transferred. It has to stay with that permit. But in this case, the permit is being satisfied by the off-street parking requirement is being satisfied, and the other conditions that are being added on later are not really part of the requirement for the permit.
Correct, we've advised the applicant they could not transfer those 30 parking spaces to a different location without amending the CUP.
Okay.
Exactly my question, yeah.
Jeannie, haven't heard from you.
Well, I've been nodding my head with most of what Jim, I was nodding. I will say that I don't share the concern here that this end of the table shares. I do agree 100% with Mr. Boland in that the number is what I'm concerned about, and having to police, for lack of a better word, or enforce something that is private property. I think that I fully support the Board of Adjustment's decision.
I have another question.
Ann? We haven't heard from Ann yet.
I guess I just find it to be somewhat contradictory that the appellant stated that the history of these 4 CUPs are not related, but that contradicts the application to have these serve both locations. I think you can't have it both ways. Either they are or aren't related, and so that's something that stands out to me.
Did you say something, Catherine?
Yeah, I had wanted to talk about the enforcement piece, and I think that it got off track. It's not about the city enforcing it. It would be New St. Andrews enforcing, and that would be part of the conditional use to prove that it's not the shell game, which is what the whole reason this is coming up is because the 2 parking lots are next to each other. That's why it is, and that's why we're talking about this, and that's what the confusion is all about. And it wasn't clearly stated to us to make sure that the mitigation is for that piece of property. It doesn't become clear.
Okay.
Seems to me that it's pretty clear because it's within, the condition was it had to be within a quarter of a mile and it had to be off-street. And both of those things are met. And certainly there's confusion about who parks where. And when the parking came up, issue came up on the previous permits, and Dr. Merkel stated that the students are required to buy a parking permit, but he has no control of where they park, whether they use that permit or whether they park on the street because it's more convenient. They can't really police that. So the enforcement becomes, impossible. Or if they're charged with enforcing it, then the city has to then enforce their enforcement. It becomes ridiculous. So,
Yep, the only thing I think, it would be, if we're talking about kind of a change now, and we say they just need their total between these 2 CUPs of whatever it is, 42 of them can be anywhere, and 47 of them have to be within a half mile, and they can be, quarter mile, thank you, and they can be bundled however they want, the total is all that matters, then yes, I think we have no issue. However, so far, it has been presented as these are 2 distinct entities, each with a condition placed upon them for that particular entity. So far, they've been coming forward as separate things with separate requirements where the parking is tied to each location. So I think to merge them is certainly an option, but I don't think that's what was before the
Well,
Board of Adjustment. That seems like a different
Then they've got
question.
they've got their 25 spaces on that south parking lot.
Well, which, as
So-
long as they can ensure that that will be reserved for that 112 as it's intended.
The condition of what the Board of Adjustment said they had to have that parking lot up to city standards as well as signing, and that signing will say that, or should say that.
Say
Yes.
that it's
part
for
of-
112, because that was the
No,
only,
say that is reserved for the new St. Andrews, whatever, however they have their permits or whatever they do.
okay, so that's saying they can be combined.
No, I'm not saying that. Don't read anything into it. It's just
Sorry.
they're gonna put a sign up, whose lot it is, who it represents, and pave it and stripe it as the city code. That's what the Board of Adjustment said, yes. Gina?
I might just be the only one in the room that isn't hearing the punchline here, but is this because the 2 parking lots are next to each other that we're concerned about this?
No, I think because they're next to each other, I think that should be disregarded, and that makes it very easy to say, well, why does it matter? All that matters is there's enough combined. And if it's true that all that matters that there's enough combined, then we will be prepared that when something comes in the other direction too, to meet the remainder of the 50% that's required, the South NSA students can park there as well, which means that parking will not be available for what it was intended for to mitigate the use of the music conservatory. So I think it's just more of a decision of, are we kind of shifting to say the total is all that matters, and this is really a combined thing that's NSA with these 2 locations?
No, that's not what was
Okay.
being said at all. They've got 25 spots that they have located that they're dedicating. Eventually, within 5 years, they're gonna have to find 22 more spots somewhere within a quarter miles of that north building. And who knows when that's gonna happen or when we're gonna see it. So all we should be concerned with is what the CUP says, and we're talking about those 25 parking spots, and that's what the Board of Adjustment, as I read through the testimony from the Board of Adjustment, that's how they identified it. I don't see any difference in that.
So when you say dedicated, or when we read the Board of Adjustments dedicated,
The
do we mean dedicated to
25
students that?
25 spots out of 47, Brandy.
Right, but do you mean dedicated to 112 or dedicated to NSA student
25 out of
use?
47 for 112 North Main,
Okay, that's the one part that,
which was required as a
Okay.
conditional use permit because all the other parking has been satisfied.
okay, so that makes sense to me, but that's the one thing that in the transcript, right now, NSA was talking about it not being dedicated to 112, that it could be used by either location. So if we could have a way to be sure that it is understood and that there is something in place to make sure that that portion is dedicated to 112, as it is intended to be, then I see no issue.
This is an organization that has dotted every I and crossed every T with every one of the CUPs that they have. We have no information or any, in my book, any suspicion that they're not going to come up with the 47 that they need for the old CJ's building. I really feel like this is getting extended unnecessarily.
No, I don't
I'm
think
going
there's.
to recognize Art, he had something he wanted to bring
I had
up.
something to say is that relative to which exact student is using which exact space for which exact building is a rather nebulous concept because students by their nature are rather will-o'-the-wispy. So in theory, they could start part of their day at the south building, spend part of their day at the north building, and does it make any sense to get into a car, move it 20 feet to a different slot? No. So I think that the way that it's structured with the interpretation of staff that the 505 lot will remain as part of the required mitigation for the south campus, the addition of 25 slots is a partial 50% mitigation of the requirements at the north campus. I think it takes care of itself, and over-regulation of exactly which student's car is stuck in exactly which space becomes an issue of micromanagement when the requirements of the CUPs are actually being met.
Well, I think it's being met as long as there's something in place that those 25 are for 112.
What happens when the student changes from the south campus to the north campus? Do they get in their
You mean-
car and roll across?
No. So if a student is enrolled on the north campus, they can take classes on the south campus. They're still enrolled on the north campus. They don't have to move their car. They're entitled to park
Well,
in
there
either
it is.
one, if they're enrolled in both. The whole idea is this addition of 300 students in the conservatory is creating additional enrollees at that location with additional parking requirements. If there's someone enrolled in both, they can park in either. They wouldn't need to move back and forth. Would be my understanding, but.
I have a comment. Ms. Mineta talked about, which is what I also read in the transcript, that I felt like the Board of Adjustment got caught up in the private property piece of it. And I agree with what she was saying, that as an entity, that is their place to make a decision about what mitigation is in looking at how the city has to deal with it, not thinking about or devaluing the private property owner's rights. But to me, the end of the meeting lost focus, and they spent time thinking, well, they should be able to do whatever they want to do with the private property. And I understand that they were coming from respecting NSA's ability to do that. But because of that, I felt like they lost what the whole conditional use permit request was about, which was about mitigating the parking spaces for this particular building. So,
Yeah, I think what you're talking about is when when the conditions were put on the permit, it was that you had to have this many spaces, and to bring in these other things about enforcement and usage and private property rights were not part of the condition.
Right.
So those are not something we can really consider. What we have to consider here is, are there parking places that are off-street that are within a quarter of a mile? And there are, so.
Yep, and that definitely, yes, I agree with you. They meet the conditions of the distance and the number of parking spots without a doubt. The only thing that has not been made clear to the Board of Adjustment was how they intend to be sure that those spots are for the use that they were intended for.
They weren't
And if they
concerned with
become opened up to other uses, then those 25 spots aren't there.
Brandy, they weren't concerned with that, or they wouldn't have voted unanimously in favor of it. It wasn't even a discussion.
Well, it was discussed.
Well, you bet it wasn't a
Because
problem.
Dr. Merkel
but-
said that the students could
Okay,
go,
back up a
could share
second.
and go in both, and
But
that,
they didn't put that restriction on, or even put it in as a part of a condition or a relevant criteria or anything else. They voted unanimously for it with the two conditions that I spoke about earlier. Paving it, parking it up to city standards, and signing it.
right.
That was the
I
requirement.
think they, as far as maybe not having some information, is the information that was not available to the Board of Adjustment was how could there be assurances that these spaces would be meeting the condition imposed upon 112 and would be available for that use as intended?
Well, we're, right here, we can't.
Yes.
If that was to be considered, then that should have been part of the condition back in 2017 when the permit was required, when the number of spaces, when that decision was made. That should have been one of the conditions that was put on it then. At this most recent hearing, that wasn't one of the conditions they were allowed to consider, was how that was going to be enforced and used, and that wasn't one of the conditions that they had on the table. That's adding something that wasn't in the record of the original conditional use permit.
And one thing that this
That's
body,
in my view.
and this body up here cannot add something that's, or assume some kind of new evidence, may or may not. We can't do that, so.
So therefore, given what we've been talking about up here and kind of spiraling off in directions other than what's actually under consideration, I move that we sustain the decision of the board.
Second.
So, Jim, if I might, so I think with the condition that was imposed in the first one was that it would be signed for NSA use, for NSA parking use only, correct? The original lot?
The original, you're talking about the 22, or the 25 spaces that are under consideration now, or the original?
No, were you talking about the original one?
No, no.
Oh, okay.
I was
Okay.
talking about in 17, when the
Okay.
condition was put on that they had to find 47 off-street parking
Oh, got it.
places.
Okay, I missed
That there was not a condition of enforcement or discriminating for use. So wasn't something that was in the record to be
Right.
considered. That's
So
why I think we can't really deal with that.
Okay, so here's what we've got. Art made a motion to sustain a decision of the Board of Adjustment, and Gina seconded that motion. I'll start the roll with Catherine.
Did you have anything else you wanted to say? Okay. Well, I just want to say one other thing then. Sorry. I don't.
Say whatever you want.
Yeah,
Brandon.
no, I feel that the two conditions have been met, but I do have concerns that the Board of Adjustment didn't have information about how to assure that it would truly be dedicated to the use that it's supposed to be dedicated to. And I'm concerned about the merging being a potential problem, because that's different than two separate CUPs with two separate parking requirements, each of which meets the requirements for that facility. So legally, do you think it is okay for us to decide the total is fine, and they don't have to be separately assigned to each location? Is that a problem?
Well, legally, I believe the Board of Adjustment, and based on the written transcript that we all have before us, they did consider that. That was an issue that was brought up. There was a question raised, and they made the decision that they made.
Okay, so with that, you guys know what the motion is. The motion is, repeated again, sustain the decision of the Board of Adjustment. Is motion by Art, second by Jean. I'll start to roll with Catherine.
Aye.
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 I am going to vote nay, and my justification for that, and I misspoke earlier and referred to the appellant as or the applicant, I'm sorry, appellant as the applicant, but the applicant stated that the history of these four CUPs are not related. I think that directly contradicts the application, which states to generally support the educational services for NSA. I think that indicates that they are, and if this was meant to mitigate parking for one CUP, then the application should have specified that.
Okay, well, we got a motion that was approved 5-1 to sustain the decision of the Board of Adjustments. We will take a 5-minute break, folks. It is 8:23. We will come back at 8:30.
here.
We're back. Our meeting is resumed, ladies and gentlemen. And that last issue that we just got done talking about, item number 6, we do have one action as for the staff to prepare to write up the final decision action report. Bill, is that correct? So we need to have some kind of a motion on that, I guess, or just how's that work, or direction?
A motion would be fine, just to
Okay.
direct staff to prepare the written decision.
Your Honor, I make a motion to direct staff to prepare the
Written decision.
written decision for the CUP.
Seconded.
Okay. Okay, I got a motion by Gina and a second by Art for the staff to prepare the written decision based on the actions this evening on the CUP. Any discussion on that before we move on? I'll start to roll with Ann.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Okay. Bill, do you guys need anything else on that?
That's all we need, Your Honor.
Okay. Now we will move on to item number 7, ladies and gentlemen, which is our public hearing on the City of Moscow Comprehensive Plan update. Mike, Ray, you have got the floor lower, sir.
Thank you, Your Honor, council members. So before you tonight, we have a update to the 2009 Comprehensive Plan. This is pretty much a culmination of a couple years of work for the Planning and Zoning Commission. And so just to give you a little bit of background, the Comprehensive Plan is really our long-range general planning document for the city. The Local Land Use Planning Act, state statutes requires every community to have a comprehensive plan. And it's required to address 17 topics, ranging from property rights, population, school facilities, transportation, economic development, land use, natural resources, hazardous areas, public service facilities and utilities, transportation, recreation, special areas or sites, housing, community design, and implementation, as well as airport facilities and agriculture. So the last time we had gone through a complete rewrite was 2009 for the comprehensive plan. And during that time, there was an extensive public outreach and participation program. It included neighborhood meetings, community-wide meetings, working groups, a steering committee, as well as public hearings before the Planning and Zoning Commission and City Council. So the comp plan tells us that in order to be an effective and successful plan, it really must be a living and dynamic document. And so community decision makers, City Council, Planning and Zoning Commission rely on the plan. So it's important to take a look at it, review it, and amend it to keep it current with existing conditions and other plans as well. So the document should be reviewed, evaluated, updated every 5 to 10 years. That includes up-to-date information, methods, and maps, looking at reaffirming community values, which are within the goals and objectives within the comp plan. And then, to take a look at the objectives and implementation steps, implementation actions, really follow through with the objectives and goals of the comp plan. So in 2017, the Planning and Zoning Commission really initiated the process of updating the 2009 comp plan. So they went through the entire plan, updated community data, maps, objectives, and implementation actions. They also consulted with other city commissions to update those pertinent sections which pertain to those commissions. And then on October 24th of last year, the commission conducted an open house meeting. And so that open house meeting coincided with the start of a 30-day public comment period, which lasted until November 23rd of last year. So during that comment period, we received numerous comments, and many of those subsequently ended up being incorporated in the final draft document before you tonight. And we also have an attachment with all the comments that were received during the open house, as well as the public comment period that are attached to your packet. And then January 23rd of this year, Planning and Zoning Commission conducted the public hearing, and they forwarded a unanimous recommendation of approval to City Council. So just wanted to go through kind of the plan organization, what's contained within each chapter, as well as the important updates the Planning and Zoning Commission worked through during that 2-year period. So it starts with the preface, introduction and purpose. Chapter 1 is community context, so providing some history and background on the community, community demographics. Chapter 2 is dedicated to community character and land use. Chapter 3 is our mobility chapter. 4 is dedicated to parks, recreation, and open space. 5 is the public services, utilities, and growth capacity chapter, really our infrastructure chapter. 6 is devoted to economic development, and Chapter 7 really discusses implementation, so how often the plan's supposed to be updated and the process of going through the update process. So looking at Chapter 1, the noted updates, so we went through and updated community demographic information. So shortly after 2009, we came out with the 2010 census from the federal government. So we updated a lot of those numbers within the document, and then we have annual American Community Surveys, which come out every year, and we were able to update that information with those numbers from those studies. So current population projections, and university enrollment were also updated in Chapter 1. We also had a bit of floodplain information, so of note, we had a 2013 campus recreation project, so that daylighted Paradise Creek, which extended through campus, and that really changed the floodplain within that area for the better. So these were the maps that were adjusted. This was the previous map. You can see we've got 2 regulated 100-year floodplains within the community, Paradise Creek and the South Fork of the Palouse River. You can see within this area, the wide ballooned area in blue, encroaching into downtown. So as part of that project, that was retracted, and really from the South Couplet to Perimeter Drive, the 100-year floodplain was remapped and retracted from a lot of those properties within downtown, which turned out to be a big deal. Those properties weren't required to carry flood insurance, and it's pretty much contained to the channel itself within those areas. So really did a lot for floodplain within the community and the downtown as part of that project. Also of note is a new section, and the Planning and Zoning Commission worked closely with the Sustainable Environment Commission on implementing a local response to changing global climate conditions section within Chapter 1. So this was the recommendation of the SEC, and there were 7 local areas of concern: water, air quality, energy usage, transportation, infrastructure, and environmental impacts, as well as climate migration and food security. And so really each section goes through some of the issues that we might be facing as a community as part of changing global climate conditions, and really ways to help mitigate and adapt to some of those issues that could arise. Chapter 2, pertinent updates, looking at, again, updating community information and data. University and college enrollment, so WSU and U of I are pretty heavily covered within this chapter, so we went through and updated information on those 2 institutions, as well as elementary and secondary school enrollment. Housing unit inventory was updated, and from that we projected future housing demands, as well as the section on affordable housing. Home occupations, which we addressed since the 2009 comprehensive plan, we ended up updating that portion. As well as historic districts and urban renewal districts. So Alturas ended up reaching its 20-year horizon, and so we updated that section. In historic districts, as you all know, the Fort Russell Historic District, after multiple years of work for the Historic Preservation Commission, ended up being expanded. I believe it was 2017. And so just highlighting the expanded district within this section. And then a section on, I think, mainly entryway beautification and landscaping throughout the city. And so also of note, we have the community character and land use map within that chapter. So it really includes, this is future land use designations for properties within the city. And so this really directs our zoning whenever a rezone is proposed in certain areas. This is one of the main components of directing what that future zone should be anticipated as being for that property. And so the major shift here was, you can see from the 2009 map, all those gray areas. This was a neighborhood conservation district that was previously anticipated. We did many things that really don't require us to do neighborhood-specific zoning districts, and that really was the intention of neighborhood conservation. And we ran into issues with some areas where it really wasn't giving us proper direction as to what the appropriate zoning district should be. And so we went back and reassigned all those gray areas to other land use designations, and also incorporated what we thought were missing designations within the table there. So high-density residential, this kind of darker reddish color, a lot of downtown areas, and then Baker, A Street, around campus were designated as that high-density residential. So we filled that back in. And also a change would be the university, which was previously civic institutional, and that was grouped with a lot of the churches and religious institutions and schools other than universities. And so we added that designation as well, and that's the darker blue color here. Chapter 3 is our mobility chapter. 2019 updates included community information. So once again, the community data was updated. We had bicycle commuter data, vehicle collision data that was updated. Public art master plan ended up being adopted in the time since 2009. So we just wanted to reflect that in the plan, as well as the street tree program was updated as well. And then significant map revisions, probably the principal one would be the thoroughfare plan. We did update accident-prone intersections, and that corresponded with a multimodal transportation plan back in 2013 is where we used those numbers. Multipurpose pathways was updated, as well as transit routes. And I just wanted to quickly go over the significant changes in the thoroughfare plan. As you can see, this is the 2009 plan. Those green lines represent collectors, and the blue lines represent minor arterials. The rest of the streets in gray represent local neighborhood streets, and then you obviously have the national highway system heading out in each quadrant there. So the significant changes would be the classification of the A Street corridor. And so these are largely the recommendations of the Transportation Commission. And Les McDonald with Public Works ended up coming and discussing these with the commission. And this is one of the heavily debated, discussed topics throughout the process. And so the changes within the eastern quadrant would be 3rd Street corridor, which the commission's proposing to be a minor arterial, as well as 6th Street. And then changes in that southeast and northeast quadrants are the ring road concept. And so if you recall, part of the 2013 multimodal transportation plan did a cost-benefit analysis on the different ring road concepts surrounding the city, determined that the western quadrants are really the quadrants where the benefit of the ring road pretty much outweighs the cost, but not so much in the eastern quadrants. And so what the Transportation Commission worked through was using existing roadways and projected future roadway alignments in order to satisfy that need for an alternate bypass in the eastern quadrants. So you can see the intention is Palouse River Drive, and then that ends up just looping through some of the existing roadways and eventually connecting with North 95 north of town. And so those were really the significant changes within the thoroughfare plan. Chapter 4, Parks, Recreation, and Open Space. Once again, updating that community demographic data. Looking at the existing future parks and needs assessment and updating that, as well as all the parks that have been added since 2009, which we've had quite a few: Baker Street, Lillian Woodworth Ottness, Indian Hills, Morgan's Orchard, and the Edible Forest Park, which was the last time of publication. It's now Harvest Park. But we still have it as Edible Forest Park because that was the last draft that we had. And Atani Park, and we also did get the name change of Triangle Park, which ended up being changed from Eastgate Park, which occurred in late 2018. So just to give you an idea, I'm not going to go through all these maps, but really the changes to the map system here was just to make it more user-friendly. Before we had all the schools listed for some reason over here. And so the major change is just listing all the parks in our park system. And I mean, it was really cluttered before. You can see all the names of all the individual parks, and it really just clutters the map. Now we just assign a number to those and have the corresponding park name here to the left of the screen. And really just for ease of use and clutter, it's just made it so much better for all these maps. And so, you know, the rest of the maps are attached to your packet. I'd certainly be able to, you know, go through each of those if you so choose. Looking at Chapter 5, the significant updates, we had a couple plans that ended up being created since 2009 that informed this chapter. So the 2012 Comprehensive Water System Plan, 2011 Comprehensive Sewer System Plan really provided us a lot of information that was used to update this section. And of course, we had well number 10, well production information and total water production was updated. PBAC, Palouse Basin Aquifer Committee Action Plan was updated, so they have a multi-point action plan for the region, and we had updated that as part of this process to be consistent with what they had in their plan and on their website. And then wanted to recognize some things that we've done as far as water conservation, so the lawn reduction and low-flow toilet rebate programs. Expanded the chapter to talk about all those great things as far as the rebates. And then we had the name change from the wastewater treatment plant to the water reclamation reuse facility, made those changes. And then we had some improvements to our sanitary sewer system since 2009, stormwater public safety sections, really just saw minor updates. And then, of course, our solid waste and recycling section, just to recognize the expanded single stream program. And then we did update that to reflect the changes that happened just this last year. So economic development, really we just had some slight shifting in major employers since 2009. So regarding the type and number of employees, that's all been updated. Employment and income has also been updated for the top 5 industries. And then looking at the 2 universities, once again, updating student enrollment, employment, as well as economic impact of students in the region. I think Stephen Poole had the study, and we ended up citing that in the document as well. Sectors of the economy have been updated. So we have healthcare, manufacturing, agriculture, information, retail, tourism, and construction. And then looking at those economic indicators and updating those. So labor force, unemployment, underemployment, and demographics. And then the target industries the city's wishing to actively promote has also been updated. And so we've got arts, entertainment, recreation, professional, scientific, technical services, healthcare and social services, and tourism have also been updated. So that brings us to the last chapter, implementation section. Really a short chapter. We have a directive to do an evaluation and appraisal report anytime that we want to update the comprehensive plan. The commission has decided just to eliminate that report and just go straight to the commission, just like we've done with this update. Work closely with the Planning and Zoning Commission and our department to go through and determine whether or not the document needs to be updated, and just go ahead with that process instead of creating another evaluation report just to go over that information. So just that's really the significant change there. And then that just concludes presentation, but the council actions before you tonight to conduct a public hearing, and then after considering public input, approve the resolution to adopt the updated comprehensive plan without modifications or with modifications, or reject the resolution or take other such action deemed appropriate. I'd certainly be able to answer any questions that you have, and Wendy McClure, the chair of the Planning and Zoning Commission, is here as well.
Thank you,
You have any
Mike.
questions?
Questions for Mike before we get going
I'd
here?
just like to make a comment and thank Wendy and Mike and everybody that's been involved in planning and zoning, all the work they've done to do this, because it's a huge job. And they've put a huge amount of work in, and I very much appreciate it. And what they've come up with is great, I think.
Jim kind of took my tagline, but that's exactly how I feel. Wendy McClure, who's the chair of Planning and Zoning, and Victoria Seaver, who is one of the commission members as well. And as you said, Jim, they've been working on this for 2 years, and I read through it. Now look, is it perfect? No, but is it pretty damn good? Yes. So I'll just leave it at that, and we'll go from there for further discussion. But Art?
Quick question, if we've seen some things that we think could use some tweaking, what's the mechanism to insert those or have them dealt with before final approval?
Well, we have to do the public hearing first.
Well,
And
just
then once
kinda-
that's done, then I think probably any little adjustments or tweaks or whatever, that'd be part of approving with modifications. Or,
Okay.
That's how I see it. Okay, well, with that, I'm gonna go ahead and open up the public hearing. Thank you, Mike. We will open the public hearing at 8:50. And anybody that'd like to testify, please come up, state your name and your address, and we'll give you 3 minutes to talk about the update on comprehensive plan rewrite. Well, we got nobody coming up, so I guess we'll close the hearing at 8:50 and a half. And turn it over to Art. I'll let you have the floor first.
I didn't have much, because I thought the whole thing flowed really well, and having been there and done that for the 2009, there's a lot of stuff in there. One thing relative to the floodplain map, the URA in the city went in and had a floodplain remap for the South Couplet area recently, and is that reflected in the map? It didn't look like it.
I don't think we've entirely gone through that process yet, so we still have to get that accepted by FEMA in order to have a letter of map revision to remap that South Couplet area, but Bill has
We
been
had
in charge of that
discussed that
project.
once, didn't we, Bill? What
Yes.
Mike just said.
So we did make application in spring of 17, or spring of 18,
Yeah.
for that map amendment. There's a 90-day review window on that application. There have been 2 requests for additional information that have gone through additional 90-day review windows. We just submitted our last round of additional information about 2 weeks ago. So we're expecting that to be effective coming up in the next 90 days, we're hopeful. We're just down to last 2 items. So it has not effectively changed at this time, so that's why it's not reflected on the map.
Okay. But if we adopt the final, then that is what it is. With that little pool around the intersection of 8 and 95.
That is the current regulatory floodplain until such time as FEMA approves our proposed
Change.
amendment.
So we kind of got a publication race here who will.
Yeah, and this is just an illustration. Certainly what's included in the comp plan is not the regulatory map. It's just what is the information that is current at the time of adoption. It is subject to change.
Also, although the maps are meant to be illustrations, they kind of flip-flop back and forth, especially in the northwest quadrant where that one annexation at the north end of Warbonnet shows up in some maps and it doesn't show up in others.
Okay.
And it's just a matter of consistency more than actuality. So I did notice that, and it bugged me. And the airport section I thought was a little terse and could use some more amplification, especially relative to its impact on transportation with the anticipated runway. So although not there, it's, should be included that the cities have gotten involved in realigning the runway for better instrument landing and things like that. So I thought the airport section, which is a fairly terse little section, could maybe be popped a little bit. And no mention of well number 10 on the number of wells we have. It only goes up to 9 without mention of number 10 as being there as a backup for number 9 if that goes down again.
It's discussed in the plan, but that well is not connected and online yet.
When will it be online, Bill?
I think it'll be another year before it's actually online.
So do we want to include that in the list of wells? Because there's a table that has.
That's why we purposely didn't include it, was because it was still being worked on. It wasn't online yet. But we had discussed that at Planning and Zoning Commission, and that was the determination that we just leave it out for now.
It is discussed in the text, and the production rate that's anticipated is discussed in the text.
Missed that part. Thanks. And one final one was the water production table stops in 2015, and that's figure 5.7. But the data seem to be present in figure 5.2 that goes all the way up to 2017. And should those data be included in the figure 5.7 water production, which is kind of a bar graph?
I still can't get stuff to open. I'm gonna go talk to Zach. I know, 'cause I can't.
Do you want to share with me?
No, it's okay.
And you had figure
Do you have a page on that, Art?
5.7, it doesn't have pages in
Or,
here.
whatever
So
the
whatever,
section
figure
is.
5.7, or, yeah. It's a kind of a bar chart,
Uh-huh,
and it goes out to 2015.
okay.
Go back to figure 5.2, a couple pages back.
Okay.
And should those two numbers for 2016 and 17 just be slapped on to the end of the other, just for the sake of completeness?
Well, we ended up getting this from the Palouse Basin Aquifer Committee. And so I think that was the reason we had data coming from our city departments, and then this was also coming from PBAC. And so that's why you see a little bit of a difference between the 2 years there.
Seems to me that all the data match up. It'd be, and since this is an illustrative report, I think it makes sense to put those numbers onto the bar chart.
We would just need to see if PBAC can provide the 5 years running average, the other additional data, the ceiling target, and the 1% growth rates. Those are all included in this graphic that came from PBAC. So we would see if we needed to project, and we have to get an updated graphic from PBAC. This was the most current image that they had available that included those targets and limits in that 5-year average
Yeah,
trend.
these are just the pumping, Moscow's pumping rate. How many gallons did we pump out?
Figure 5.7?
Yeah.
But it also includes the blue line and the red line.
Yeah.
And the ceilings.
Yeah.
So it includes more than just production.
Right.
It's-
So I'm just thinking with our production figures,
We'd have
It
to get the
doesn't-
graphic from PBAC and see if we could amend it to add those years. Otherwise, the production data is in the plan.
yeah, so I don't know, it just seems truncated. So I don't know if it's something to talk to P-BAC about, or if it really matters a whole lot. It just is another one of those things my little scientific eyes caught and said, wait a minute. So,
That's up to the council. If you wanted delay adoption for that to be updated, we could do that.
so,
Brandy?
Oh, I thought at the administrative, I know I had lots of little, they were very minor things, and you did a wonderful job of making those slight little changes. There's just something else that if it's not that significant, but in the parks part, it was just about ball fields. And again, it's something that, just comparing the prior one where it talks about the need for ball fields. Let's see what that is. Just says the need for 14 baseball and softball fields, and that was the same number in the 2009, and I know since then we have the Joseph Street ball fields. Can we make that number come down because of the addition of those? Or do we still need that many more?
We would need to consult with Parks and Rec. This was their section.
Yeah,
to review
okay.
and update.
It's one of those just little, wanting to reflect things that have been accomplished since 2009, and I know that has occurred, but if you want to see if it's
And they certainly,
worth
yeah, they
checking in with
certainly
Dwight about it, but-
reviewed it, and
Okay.
that wasn't one of the recommended changes, so that's why
And
we
we're still
kept it.
talking about, still referring to the West Palouse River Drive as the ball fields? Okay,
Correct.
right. Thank you.
Well, I think that, just as kind of a clarification, because that land has always been kind of designated that, but it's
Yeah.
never gonna happen, we all know, until we decide to make a parking lot or
That's what-
something out
Yeah,
of
my
it.
little note said, is that still a thing?
It is.
So,
Well,
I
think
don't know.
It's always been anticipated that was
Okay.
going to be for future playfield use, that Joseph did not meet even the current need, did not even meet the current need, not to mention the future need for athletic play facilities. So I think that property is still held for that purpose, and until such time as the, money is available and the council develops it, that's what the intended use has been.
Great. Well, I think all the public comments that did come in earlier too, quite a while back to planning and zoning, and were incorporated throughout the multiple drafts very well, so, great job.
I remember back when we did this in 2009, man, and we'd worked on it for, I don't know, 3 years at least, and it was a painful process, holy smokes, but we went through it, and we hired a consulting team who really did a pretty lousy job for us. We ended up having to do it ourselves for our own community, and we had, I don't remember how many people we had on that committee, 30 maybe.
I think 27.
27, there was a guy, I was one of them.
Remember it well.
It was the gob of them, and,
2 years of my
and
life.
it was, we had some interesting conversations over.
It was mostly you, Bill.
Yes.
Well, I knew there
I
was a
remember.
gob, you had the exact number, I knew there was around 30 of them, but man alive, it was.
I just
Gina.
had a question, kind of piggybacking on Brandy's question about the 14 ball fields that we could conceivably still need. And that's from 2009 to now? That's right? What would have had to happen? Did we explode population-wise, or what would, if we still needed 14, what would the justification be?
We're not the right people to answer that question.
Okay.
Well,
Okay.
well,
I just.
Gina,
Yeah.
you ever hear of pipe dreams? That's what this is.
Okay.
Okay?
right.
And I think, bless everybody's heart for doing that. Christ, if I get 14 ball fields, my coach has been great, but it's, I think it was kind of more of a pipe dream and a reality, and that was kind of an overkill.
Okay.
That's my opinion, but I had nothing to do with it back then. I thought it was kind of silly at that time, but we made progress since then, so.
Right on. It'd be interesting to maybe talk to Dwight or David.
Well, it's usually the National Parks and Rec Association, I believe, that puts out kind of the standards, and then they're based upon population and other factors that determines how many, different types of parks are
Okay.
needed.
Perfect.
Well, one
So
of the-
it's based upon that.
Mayor,
Jen?
if I may, I know the Parks and Rec Department, Dwight, is working on an update to the Parks and Rec Master Plan as well. So you may see some of those figures change
Indeed.
when you review that plan in the future.
I'll make one more comment about that too. We've had such a problem in this country with childhood obesity that the more parks and the more playfields and more trees for kids to run and climb and jump and, and be more active, the more the better in my view. And so I always kind of think of that when we see things like that. It's not a reality that's probably going to happen, but that whole idea about getting kids and getting more involved, as adults we need to do that too, but it's got to start with kids. Other comments on other things?
I'd say just the only, one of the questions I had, and maybe others did too, administrative, that was answered, but would like to just throw it out there now too, is, the carbon emission goal of reduction of 20% by 2020. So we're coming up to that, but I think you explained that this wouldn't be the place to be setting a new goal. That happens outside of it and is eventually reflected in an updated comprehensive plan. Is that?
Correct, yeah. I think the ultimate goal would probably, and I don't want to speak for administration, but typically you have climate change action plans where you have goals like these listed. It's a lot more specific document to that particular event than a comprehensive plan would be. But I'm sure that administration and our sustainability department will be taking a look at that, obviously, when our horizon year reaches with the 2020 and looking at what the council wants to do as far as a new goal.
Right, right. So you were explaining there wouldn't be a gap in having a goal between 2020 and the next comprehensive plan update. It would.
No.
Right, right, yeah. Thank you.
Jenny, do you have a point where,
No, just if you have any other questions on the greenhouse gas inventory.
on the what?
On the greenhouse gas inventory.
I couldn't quite hear you, okay.
Sorry, I don't think the mic picked it up. But yeah, the Environmental Services Group works on updating that with their sustainability efforts there. And so I've done a couple of updates since the original goal was set, but I believe there's another one in the works for that as well.
Perfect. Thank you.
Okay.
Your Honor, I'd like to make this motion. How about that? I move that we approve the resolution to adopt the updated comprehensive plan,
Seconded.
period. There you go.
Well, okay, we got a motion by Gina and a second by Art to approve the resolution to adopt the updated comprehensive plan, period. What I heard. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay, we'll start to roll with Ann.
Aye.
Aye.
All right.
Aye.
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 Good job. We passed it and we moved on. Thank you very much for all the hard work. Good job, Wendy and team. Pass that on to the rest of the commission for me, if you will. You guys did a good job.
Thank you, Mike.
For good. Well, let's see, that concludes the end of our normal stuff. We'll go into reports. Jim, any reports for us tonight?
Well, I kind of do. Last Saturday was the coldest, snowiest Mardi Gras of all time in Moscow, and it was still well attended. And it's there's a bunch of people that are working on that. Tyler Palmer's one of them, and to try and bring Mardi Gras back to what it was back in the day when we had a parade and the floats and everything. So hopefully that will advance somewhat next year, and we won't have 4 feet of snow to deal with when we're doing that. This weekend is the firefighter stair climb in Seattle, and I'll be climbing with the firemen to raise $3 million to cure cancer, and we hope to cure cancer this year, but if we don't, we'll do it again next year. So anybody that wants to donate, thank you. Some people have donated, thank you. Anybody, just give me your number and I'll send it in, and I'll settle up with you some other time. So I'll have some guys from Vegas come up and get it out of you if you don't pay up. And Historic Preservation Commission met this last week, and the focus of that was on the signage, the interpretive sign for this building, and it's a pretty cool sign. It's about as big as that whiteboard there, and has some really great pictures. This building here is one of the few big public buildings in Idaho that actually has sequential construction pictures from the foundation all the way to completion. That shows the trusses being put up and everything. So it's going to be a great sign, and thanks to Mike and Wendy and everybody on the Historic Preservation for putting that sign together, and that's what's going on there. Okay, that's all I got.
All right.
Yeah, a couple things. Moscow's Arts Commission met and primarily set the schedule for the various exhibits here at the 3rd Street Gallery, and some of the other artist-based issues coming up for the plein air, the art walk, everything else. So pretty much just setting schedules there, but making good progress as always with that group. The PKC met and updated the schedule and the way they go about things. So the boot camp per se is no longer there. It consists now of a 2-day ideation event on the weekend coming up this spring, a little later on, and then followed up with the actual implementation 2-day event in the fall instead of cramming it all into 1 week, which is hard for people to get to. So there will also be an inclusion closer towards summer of a high school-based Inventors Day, how to get your invention onto the market. And that could be very interesting for all of the regional schools, for people who want to participate on both sides of the border, both counties, actually all 4 counties, if we can talk them into it. So that's what's going on with that one.
Question for you, Art. So they're breaking up the boot camp into 2 sessions, is that right?
Mhm.
So if you went to one, would you need to go to the other, or are they separate events?
In theory, you should do both,
Gotcha.
because one leads into the other. And they essentially wind up at the end of the first one, the ideation section, with a homework list. Go out and do this stuff, and then when you come back in fall, you'll have your homework done. We can proceed from there. Gives
Great.
people a little more time to think about it and mull things over.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just one, which was that PBAC met since we last had our meeting, and a big focus for them right now, that because there are 4 proposed solutions, is communication. And so there was a presentation by the executive director about a couple different options for staffing. They're looking at either making her full-time or working with the former executive director. Basically, they're just trying to figure out what it would look like to best utilize her and her time. So I think we're all just gonna sort of think about that and then make a decision at the next upcoming meeting. But that was, big topic.
Brandy?
I have not had any commission meetings since our last council meeting. Have farmers market tomorrow. Met the first presidential candidate at the Get Public event today, and the rest are coming over the next few days.
Cool.
Gina?
Tree Commission meets tomorrow, so I'll have an update for you in a couple weeks. Parks and Rec Master Plan Workshop was last week on the 23rd. Like Jen mentioned earlier, they are moving ahead with public comment. The CETA board meeting, I had to split the evening. I had to go to half of the master planning thing for Parks and Rec and then run home and dial into CETA, which, by the way, is not a great connection. I'm just going to say that. So basically what's coming is and it's going to the membership right now, but the CETA board recommended a dues increase over a 5-year period. Right now, the city of Moscow pays $5,400, and in 5 years, on this plan, we would pay $8,400. And there are numerous reasons why, one of which is that, we may or may not see tangible evidence of CETA's work, but it does support the region. And again, with that concept of supporting all boats in the region, that's part of their rationale. Again, it isn't set in stone until they take it to the membership in April. So I'll have an update for you then after that meeting. Friday evening from 5 o'clock to an intense 11 o'clock, I judged Invent Idaho State Finals. It's for children throughout the state of Idaho from first grade all the way up to senior in high school to present their inventions. And it was so cool. It was everything from keeping actually the winning proposal from that evening was a mechanism by which diapers can be kept on babies who have figured out that you can take your pull-ups off and you pull the things. Cutest thing ever. And it's like a LED thing that actually alarms, so somebody that's taking care of you as a baby or as an adult or a special needs individual, it alarms so you can go and take care of the situation. Called the pee protector. It was so fun. It really was cool, but it was an intense 6 hours. I will tell you that there's not enough tiramisu on the planet to make that a short night, but very fun, very interesting. A lot of grad students from the university, a lot of tech transfer and that sort of thing. So it was really cool. That's all my reports.
Catherine?
Before I give the report on the sustainable environment, I want to thank Bill and Mia and Mike for the continuing education as a council member and to the community members that always provide feedback at meetings. So David and Victoria and Joanne, it's great the way our community works together that way. All right, we had a 3-hour meeting for sustainable environment. There were 20 people, and the city is looking for volunteers that will be interested in being trained by the Idaho Resources Board to do a survey about water alternative options. And if you're interested, contact Kelly Cooper, because we're trying to figure out how we're going to have the water for us here in Moscow. And then Moscow High School and Moscow Middle School now have Trex collection boxes. There was a presentation about solar panels, about NET, which means no battery metering system, for the Herc pool, and an idea about the police station. Ty Thompson of the city presented the hydrothermal weed control apparatus that will be used this year in streets, sidewalks, and other city right-of-ways. What it does is it explodes the plant cell walls. There's quick decomposition, localized application, no overspraying, and no weather considerations, and it's safe for city staff and people. And so that's going to be what we're doing. They're going to do it for 40 days. This summer, they'll use about 500 gallons of water a day. The water cannot be reclaimed water. It has to be clean water. And then this process is about less than $16,000, which works out great for our budget. We've budgeted $13,500 for pesticide and herbicide mitigation, I guess the word is. And then the Environmental Stewardship Awards are every 2 years, and that's coming up. And Kelly mentioned that no cities our size are doing incentive-based recognition for businesses except us, which that was great. Way to go, Moscow. Next meeting is March 19th at 7:15, and we're meeting at the Water Department Conference Room. And that's all I have.
Okay.
Catherine, are they working with PBAC on the water alternative thing? And
Yeah, that's what it is. The survey has to do with that, so.
Okay. So they're coordinating on that. It's not.
No, they're looking for people to
reinventing the
help.
wheel, I
Yeah,
hope.
it's with the PBAC. Yeah, thanks for that clarification.
Thank you.
Okay, February 25th, we had a Mayor's Youth Advisory Council meeting. Those are always kind of fun, and just kind of an announcement for you guys. We're gonna have our city cleanup is sometime in April. Jen, did you ever find a date on that, the end of April something?
Yes.
While she's looking at that, the reason I ask her that is that we're gonna try to incorporate these kids, our MIAC group, in when we do this. We're gonna look at an afternoon, like on a Friday, so we can get these kids down with their MIAC shirts on and stuff. I'm looking forward to that.
Last year, we cleaned up with you, my students did, remember?
Yep.
I believe it's April 26th.
April 26th, so anyway, just kind
2:30.
of, so it's a few months away. Hopefully, we'll have no snow and don't have to have them doing snow removal, that'd be nice. And then, anyway, the Mayor's Youth Advisory Council is up and alive and well, and we keep chugging away on it, so we're getting these kids involved in some things. February 27th, we had an airport board meeting. The biggest things that we talked about was a new building terminal financing, because we know that we need to have a new terminal, and there's a lot of things in the air to deal with that. Oh my gosh, it's a process, but we're pretty confident we can get 21 million bucks from the FAA, but these buildings are about $34 million depending on what you want to do. So that means we got to get stakeholders and find out other ways of helping finance that, which is part of the operation of the airport, so on and so forth. But it's a process that's probably going to take about 4 years to do. But one thing we do know is that in order to get the money from the FAA, we've got to be able to work on this in a time frame of like 4 years. So we got some time that we can deal with it too. So that's kind of a nice thing. And Interstate Aviation sold to S&P Aviation. So Doug Godwall will soon be retiring. And so anyway, that was the two biggest things, other than the usual stuff we go over in the board meeting. And then on March 1st, I had an AIC telephone board meeting, and we went over a bunch of different things. And a couple of things, annexations, man, that's been a big, big deal in the legislative thing, and it really doesn't affect us. It's huge for cities like Boise and Meridian and Napa and Garden City and Caldwell, these cities that are close together, because there's not much room between them and who gets the annexation of things going in, and so that's kind of a fight. And a little bit in Twin Falls runs into this, and a little dab in eastern Idaho, Pocatello, Idaho Falls area, and a little bit up north. Not an issue for us, but gosh, every single time we spend quite a bit of the time talking about that. The other things coming up, the liquor thing is in draft form. I don't have any clue as to how that, they did have a hearing on it and had to rewrite a bunch of stuff. I really don't know how that's going to turn out. And so we're moving forward with it. And the revenue sharing thing is kind of a bizarre thing. Got no clue how that's going to, my guess is I probably won't change this year. And URA, we're having the usual thing on URA bill that you need to kind of stay up on, because I'll have another board meeting on Friday that we need to discuss this, because we do have 2 representatives and 1 senator. Dan Johnson's the senator out of Lewiston, and he's not a huge fan of URAs because they constantly fight down there between the fight between the council and the county commissioners. And I'd like to get a chance to have a conversation with them on a one-on-one, because it works really well for communities that work together, getting stuff done with their county commissioners. And of course, Mike Loyal and another guy down in southern Idaho, so we'll have to see how that goes, but we really need to stay focused on that bill and see how that comes up, in case I need to get on the horn or write a letter or whatever. And also on March the 1st, I went out to McDonald's school, and that was Dr. Seuss Day, and I read Dr. Seuss books, 6 of them, and Green Eggs and Ham is my very favorite, and I did that to one of my grandson's 2nd grade class. And fun thing about kids, boy, they'll ask you anything. I always get asked how old I am. So I know I must look really, really old to them, so I tell them my age, and the kids will say, man, that's really old. I said, yes, it is. The scary part is I can remember when I was your age, which was a long time ago. Anyway, fun stuff. With that, Jen, do you have anything?
I don't.
Okay, I'd entertain a motion to adjourn this evening from somebody. All in favor, aye? Opposed? We're out here at 9:19. Thank you, everyone.